Hello, my crafty friend, and welcome to today's little flip through video, or should I say big flip through video. I got a little bit carried away with the idea of making flow-ish or flow style junk journals for my Etsy shop as kind of a way to share the wealth and de-stash some of my hoard. So I went ahead and made 4 of the books that I'm going to show you. I'm just kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to do this because it is such a treasure trove and such a giant pile of stuff that I've got here that I think it'll be easier to set 3 of the 4 books aside and just focus on one. So yeah, all 4 of these have the same number of things in them and the same general things in them, but they do vary slightly. You probably noticed the little people on each one is different. And so, okay, I'm gonna slow down for a second here and just briefly let you know what a flow-ish journal is, if this is a new concept to you. So get yourself some coffee or tea or juice or whatever you want to drink because this might be a long one. Flow-ish journals are inspired by the craft lovers magazine called Flow, which is especially made for people who do paper crafting. And Flow magazine, if you haven't heard of it, is really popular in the junk journal making community and the snail mail community. Each page is decorated and it's not made to flip through and then recycle or just keep it intact. It's meant to be torn apart and used. So for example, there are detachable perforated papers that are meant to be wrapping paper and some that you can kind of cut out and fold into envelopes. And really it's a magazine meant to be, yeah, it's kind of like a paper collection bound in the form of a book. Flow-ish journals are exactly that, but in a junk journal format. So what I've done is put together craft stashes in the form of books that are meant to be taken apart, where every single thing that's used in the book is removable and usable. So if you're distracted by the background fabric, isn't this gorgeous? This is a scarf that I bought thinking that I would cut it up and make it into journal covers, and then I fell so much in love with it that I just can't. I wore it recently to my cousin's wedding because I thought it was so beautiful, and I don't think I'll ever be able to cut this one up. So I'm compromising and using it as a video background, that way it still gets used. Anyway, so yeah, this is what the journals look like. Each one has the same closure, which is this bit of thrifted yarn. It's tied in a bow so you can untie it and use that whole piece of yarn. It's got a lot of removable stuff, even just clipped to the cover, so I'll kind of go through what all the stuff is. First and foremost, each one has a little piece of Victorian ephemera stuck to the cover. You can kind of read the back. So these were parts of Victorian packaging that a lady in the 1880s cut up and glued into her scrapbook. And I've salvaged those from the scrapbook and decided to share them in these books here. There is a postcard of one of my original watercolor paintings. I called this one Sunrise Over a Floating Doorway because this to me looked like that. One of my art business cards. Oops, would help if it's right side up. With each one, I've tucked in a packet of this beautiful tea because I feel like drinking tea and flipping through a new junk journal would be the perfect pairing. And I picked this tea specifically not only because it's a delicious caffeine-free thing that everyone would like, but also because the packaging is just so gorgeous. I've seen other junk journal artists reuse the packaging from tea bags and make them into little miniature books. And I think this would be the perfect packaging for that. So I wanted this to be so that literally everything in it can be used to make a journal. So I have a binder clip here. It's a pretty rose gold one, and using a split jump ring, which you can easily open up and take off, I've attached a boho bead that I made, and it has a little piece of amethyst dangling from the bottom. And so you can either clip this as it is onto your junk journal or take it apart and use the pieces. And then on a giant paper clip, I've made kind of a tassel, but a usable tassel, by sticking some embroidery thread, some pretty vintage trim, some new sparkly sequin trim. Each one has a different type of old chain, and then a little pouch of charm goodies. So each one has the same charms but different buttons, and they kind of have a magical, mystical theme, just because that tends to be what I collect the most of. So yeah, they'll each be different. They each have a piece of vintage thrifted jewelry, this one being a clip-on earring. They've each got some real little amethyst pieces, some vintage beads. This one also has a vintage cufflink, some pentacle charms. For those of you not familiar with this practice, they're not evil. They're symbols of earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. An empty little vial charm that you can either put grains of sand, or you can put a little piece of rice and write your name on it, which is what these were made for. Or do what I do and write a little secret message on a tiny strip of paper, wrap it up like a scroll, and slip it into the tube. We've got beads, a scarab, a dragon, a vintage button that I think is really pretty. That came from my grandmom's button stash. Each one has a little ohm. Oops, I'm dropping the ohm. Anyway, and there's still more in here. This isn't even everything. This is just a small selection. I think the 3D dragon is one of the coolest things. And the scarab with hieroglyphs. I don't know, they're all cool. I wanted these books to be the kinds of things that, you know, when you see them, you start getting ideas for journal spreads that you want to do or books that you want to make. And I find sometimes when we buy all the stuff that we work with, there's no real thrill or excitement because we know what we have. But sometimes when you go through somebody else's craft stash, you get ideas and you get inspired and you think, oh wow, I know what I could do with that. So that's what I love about the flow-ish journals that people make. It's kind of like you get to raid somebody else's craft stash. So yeah, you get the little baggie of goodies, the little strips of these things. I'm gonna set them aside as I go through the book, just to make it easier to do the flip. Okay, the last thing I've tucked into the cover before we actually go into it is a card that I have, be careful with this, these are little pins, but a card that I've pinned samples of really thick lace to. The thick lace would be perfect to use on a journal cover or to make into a pocket. Some of this pretty flag trim that looks great made into tassels. This pretty net trim. Whenever I do an ocean themed journal, I use some of this in it. And each one has a different cream colored vintage lace. So that's one of the things that will be different from book to book. The other things will be the same. Each one has a closure made with this same really cool fiber. Again, that would look really cool in an ocean themed book. And each one has a different vintage doily. So that's on this one. Each one will be different. Now, because it's a flowish book, this pulls right off And once this is untied, it comes right off. So the doily is removable and reusable. These are removable and reusable. It's exactly the same on the back. So yeah, like I said, it's meant for crafters. Now you'll see that there's some washi tape here, and it's a pretty crystal washi tape. So of course that also peels right off and can be used. And what it's doing is creating a pocket out of the folded piece of really heavy cardstock scrapbook paper that I used to make the cover. So another difference in each book is that each one will have a different piece of paper for the cover. But in the pocket, you'll get the same things book to book. A postcard from one of my favorite places in the world, Waterton. A postcard of a magic eye design. Each postcard will be different, but they'll be similar, like Waterton, magic eye. A really beautiful piece of handmade paper with real rose and flower petals pressed into it with a matching card. Those will be the same in each book. Pages out of a little book that I thrifted, all about calmness. So each book will have different quotes, but I put 4 pages in each book. And then a beautiful Chinese money envelope that I have stuffed with little fabric scraps. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll leave something as a surprise for those of you who might choose to pop over to my Etsy shop to buy one of these. And I should mention, I'm pricing them at $65 Canadian each, which I strive to make this a bargain. I feel like this is about sharing supplies. So when I added it all up, the items inside, if sold separately, would be well over 100, maybe even 150. For example, the boho bead clip like this would be maybe $10. The bag of treasures would be about $15. The original art print postcard would be $2.75. The Victorian ephemera alone, I've seen other Etsy sellers sell those things for $5 each. So like just the stuff stuck to the cover, the vintage doily, about $3. So just the stuff stuck to the cover alone would equal about $50. So I tried to make this into a bargain so that you can make yourself a beautiful journal with fancy supplies without having to invest a fortune into buying all the things separately. So, okay, the first page is a sheet from a ledger from the 1960s. So I folded that and made it the full ledger paper. And to it, I clipped using one of these pretty diamond paper clips, a set of 12 birthstone origami pages. Aren't these cool? So there's 12, one for each month of the year. They each have a different gemstone. I very ambitiously bought 2 packages of this paper a couple of years ago, thinking that I would make little origami envelope sets out of them to sell in my Etsy shop. And then I discovered how long it takes to make an origami envelope, and I'll just never get through them. So that's how they made it into this book. Some really cool tickets. This is a book page out of a book of Chinese gardens that I thought was gorgeous. So each journal will have all of the pages I'm showing you, but they will be different. So each will have a different Chinese garden paper, but the same strip of tickets. Each will have a page of this sheet music. It's Dutch sheet music from 1935. So each one will be a different piece, but each book comes with them. Then the next piece of sheet music, I folded over and made into a pocket with a little paper clip and stuffed the pocket with vintage sewing pattern paper. So again, each book will have it, but it will be a different piece in each one. Each book has a map page from a vintage road atlas of North America. Each one will have a piece of this handmade paper with the gold and silver fibers in it. Each will have a print of one of my black and white ink drawings. So I printed these out myself on cardstock, but it is a drawing that I drew myself. Blank on the other side. Each will have a page of vintage dictionary from the 1960s. Each will have a piece of wallpaper sample from a Sears wallpaper sample book from 1927. So another cool, almost an antique, that's almost 100 years old. And each one will be different. So again, this is just an example. But I made sure that each one is beautiful. So each one will be a floral all over print. Nobody's going to wind up with a book that has like the plain paper. Each one will have some dot grid. Each will have a crystal page from a crystal information book. Each will have a piece of this really cool crinkly paper that's actually foil. I found a roll of this at a local thrift shop and it was such a cool score. Each will have a giant paper doily that I kind of folded up accordion style. Each will have a painting from an art history book. Again, different paintings in each one. Each will have a piece of giant paper that I folded up from a Life magazine from 1958. So I put lots of vintage papers. And remember, this is not sewn in, so it pulls out and you'll be able to unfold it huge. Each will have a pretty picture from a book about irises. The next page is vintage printer paper. Remember this stuff where you can pull off the little holes on the bottom in a strip? I used to love playing with that in my granddad's office where he had a printer. He would always give me the strips to play with. So I clipped onto that page a collection of French book pages. And if you're a junk journaler or if you watch a lot of junk journal videos, you'll see that these are like gold in the journal making community. And so I included the full double page from the smallest little book and then singles of 2 other size books. This one's really neat. It's from a French play. So those are a lot of fun to make into backgrounds for collage pages and to use to decorate other things. So more pages from the Iris book. Each of these books has 3 of them, a medium size, a smaller size, and then a beautiful painted illustration. I did some of the work for you by cutting out those illustrations. So a green blank ledger page, another page from another gardening book, and then that brings us to the center. And I wish I could remember whose YouTube channel I saw the idea for this on. It's 2 blank envelopes, so for sure you can use those envelopes, and they are stuck together with washi tape, so that peels off really easily to somebody who's not filming a video really easily. So yeah, you can use that whole big piece of washi tape for something else and it will not damage the envelopes to rip it open and rip it apart. So inside the first envelope, I've put some pretty fabric leaves just in time for fall crafting, and especially fun for us Canadians, the maple leaf. So each book will have 3 of those, and each book will have a little Ziploc baggie stuffed full of these canceled stamps. And these are also like crafter's gold when it comes to collaging. They still have the envelope backs on them. I bought them like that from a local antique shop. And yeah, the bag I bought was so big that in my whole life of crafting, I don't think I'll ever use the whole stash, so some for you. I had to pull this one out. I didn't notice this as I stuffed the little baggies. What a pretty envelope somebody probably made themselves to send something in. That one I would probably use that side instead of the stamp side in crafting. So yeah, each book will have that same stuff. And then in the other envelope, I've put 3 more pieces of Victorian scrapbook ephemera. So these are probably the most valuable things in these books. Like I said, they sell for about $5 each. Vintage Victorian ephemera pieces. And that's just an example. So they're not all going to have the cool birdie in tall grass or the hand with flowers, but they will each have 3 pieces that are intact, like nice pieces. And the other thing in this little envelope is some gold corners that really look cool. They add a lot to your crafting. So for example, you could glue one to a Victorian card like this and really make it fancy. You can glue them to the corners of a book cover. You can put them on an envelope like this one on each corner, and that would look so luxurious. So yeah, each one has 4 of these. 4 of these, which I think of as a full set. So yeah, I had a lot of fun figuring out what to put in these, and I tried to make it stuff that I would be excited to get if I were to get a flow-ish journal made by somebody else. This is a really fun piece. This is a strip of ballerina-themed wallpaper border that I found at a really cool thrift shop in a mountain town called Pincher Creek. And it's probably my favorite thrift shop because it's so untouched. Like the stuff that you find in there, it's priced the way a thrift store priced things back in the 90s. Like you can fill a bag of vintage books at that thrift shop for $1. And it's like a big reusable nice bag too. So yeah, it's my favorite. I think on Fridays, and no, this is not a sponsored video, but it might as well be because the stuff there is so cheap you feel like it's free. Fridays they have $10 bag days, so you can get a shopping bag on your way in, fill it up with anything in the store, and it's 10 bucks flat rate. But every day it's $1 to fill a bag of books. So that's how I mean, a lot of these book pages I paid more than that for at local thrift stores that are not as cheap as the Pincher Creek one. But yeah, if you ever get yourself to the Rocky Mountains, check out the thrift stores. So in this part of the folded vintage magazine page, I included prints that I made of 2 of my favorite pieces of Victorian ephemera. The postcards I decided to keep in my own personal collection or hoard, depending on who you ask. But I felt like sharing the beauty, so I printed one of each of these on really pretty sepia-toned linen paper and included a pair in each of these books. I think the reason these are my favorite is that I really love muted colors, despite what you might see in a lot of my journal work. I love, vibrant, flashy colors, but I also love the feeling of twilight and the effect you get at moonlight, especially on a full moon, which both of these pictures depict. And I think the contrast of like the brightish pink flowers with the muted background, there's just something so aesthetically pleasing about these to me. And so yeah, each book comes with a pair of those. I think that's the only printed thing that I printed myself in these. The rest of it is genuine book pages and antique things and vintage things. So yeah, now it's just the other sides of all of those papers. I tried to make it a really cool collection. The other side of this magazine page I folded into a pocket with a gold paper clip, and I stuffed that pocket with beautiful little music pages from another vintage Dutch music book that I found at a local thrift shop. So I took it out really carefully so that it stayed intact. One side is, I don't know what these are. It must be some kind of a legend, but just numbers. They remind me of spy codes or something. But yeah, the other side is music paper. And then these cool little specimen pockets that I recently discovered are actually made for coins. And pardon me while I reach for a second to look to see if I've got something to show you. I do. I'm trying to pull something off of my craft table as I talk. So yeah, I made this to include in my personal junk journal that I promise I'll do a flip through video of one day. It's a Canadian penny, and that might seem like a really dirty, worthless kind of a coin to put in a protective little pouch thingy like this, but there's a story to it. I was going for a walk one day around a lake, and it's my favorite kind of meditation, is to just go for a nice long walk and think and look at the sky and hear the birds and smell the trees and smell the flowers. So I was going for one of my walks, and I noticed under a bench this penny was lying there. And I got so nostalgic because it used to be that every day you'll find pennies on the ground. But Canada actually decommissioned and stopped making and stopped using pennies a few years ago. I forget which year. But yeah, pennies are no longer valid currency in Canada. Stores will round up to the nearest, 5 cents. So if something would come to like $1.91, it's really $1.90. Or if it's $1.94, it'll be $1.95 because we still have nickels and dimes. But yeah, pennies, we don't have them anymore. And I remember as a kid, my mom would always say, find a penny, pick it up all day long, you'll have good luck. And so I picked it up, and then I thought I'll save that because it's probably the last time in my life, unless I travel somewhere in the States, it's probably the last time I'll ever find a penny on the ground in Canada. So I preserved it. And so anyway, if you're into stuff like that too, here's a little pouch, and they're really easy to use. Pardon the cat hair. You just take whatever coin you want to preserve, you put it there, you put a little circle of glue around here, you fold it over. I don't want to do the honor of bending this one for you. That's half the fun. But yeah, you fold it over. I like to clip it in place while the glue dries. You've got plenty of paper clips in here to do that. So yeah. And of course you don't have to put coins in these too. In a lot of the journals that I make, I put gemstone chips in these, and then you can write on the card the name of the gemstone or the type of stone. Yeah, they're perfect for whatever you might want to put in them. Doesn't that page look cool? It's sideways. But I love how that looks even like this. It looks like a hanging garden. The end of that ledger sheet. And yeah, that brings us to the back pocket. So in the back pocket, I put in some puffy stickers. I bought these at a local thrift shop, and each book has a different set, so they're not all clear tags like this. Oh, it's funny, this one has a little thing stuck. That's under the packaging, so that came like that. But yeah, they won't all be clear tags, but different types of puffy stickers will be in each one. This is one of the coolest things for people who are craft enthusiasts. These are pages from a 1960s crafting magazine. I just pulled out random pages. So those would be fun to use as junk journal pages or as ephemera collage bits. Vintage Canadian postcards. So this came out of a Flow book for paper lovers, and I thought it would be fun to include some pages from one of their actual books in my take on their book. And each book has a set of these, but again, each one will be different. They're just letters. So for your collage, for example, you could cut out the letters to spell your name, use the numbers or the letters to write the date that you start the book on, or do whatever you want with them, but yeah, letters to play with. And the last thing is a strip of this pretty peacock trim. I'll put it down on the paper so you can see it better. Isn't that pretty? So yeah, I felt like this collection was a really good, chunky, I'm going to try to get this in the frame. You can see how thick the book looks. That's it from the top. A good chunky collection of craft supplies with plenty of fibers and fabric scraps for the textile lovers, and art prints and tea packaging. Just so many fun things to play with that if you already have a journal, you can add them to your journal, or if you're thinking of making yourself a junk journal, this is pretty much everything you need to do it. And yeah, I'll be putting these up in my Etsy shop right now. So by the time you see this video, they'll be listed. And if you buy one, you're welcome to leave me a comment at checkout about anything else that you might be interested in. For example, if you're into space galaxy as a theme, I have books with pictures of outer space, and I could add a couple of those for you. If you're into under the sea stuff, I've got books of pictures of underwater stuff. So let me know if there's something really special that you're working on, some kind of theme that you're working on. If I've got stuff to match it, I'll throw them in. And even if I don't, I'll throw in some extras. I think you can ask anybody who's ever bought something from my shop. It's never just the thing that you buy. I always like to surprise customers with some extra goodies, so you can expect the unexpected if you buy one of these Flow-ish journal craft set books. So thank you so much for watching. So much love to you. Next week I'll be back with a proper junk journal, not a craft stash junk journal. Until then, happy journaling, happy crafting, happy thrifting, happy creating, happy whatever it is that you do in your journal life. Much love to you, and bye for now.